we are Teresa and Michael Lundgren, and I have attended St. Scholastica since about 2000. And Teresa, though, has attended St. Scholastica since what, honey,
87 or 88.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
quite a long time.
that kind of gets you started here, so you can go from there. Teresa and I met and got married in 2001. In fact, 4 days before 9/11. And that's how we started off our marriage.
We were married on the Lady of Sorrows feast day.
And so that's why the difference between how long we've been coming to St. Scholastica. And doesn't seem that long now that I look back on it. It seems like it's gone pretty fast. We've seen a lot of changes in the church.
Why don't I talk about my experience
Yeah.
before
Go ahead.
before I met Michael?
Okay.
Because I started going, I think it was 87, it might have actually even been earlier, and John was the guitarist that played here.
What was his last name?
He was a Hispanic guy, and he played the guitar with other guys.
John was inflicted with Agent Orange from Vietnam.
Yeah,
He died years ago.
but in any
A really
event,
nice guy.
yeah. Anyway, he made the mass really beautiful. The way they played it was very holy, using the guitar, and the priest that was before Father Bob, I cannot remember his name. He was kind of silly. He was.
Was it Father Willette? There was Father Gaines, Father Willette, Father Urban, the two brothers.
No, he was kind of a silly priest. Yeah, that's the way I remember him. I didn't never know whether to laugh at him or what, or laugh with him. He was kind of silly. And, but anyway, I had moved out from Boulder, and I didn't know Michael, and I was married to Clint Dillon then. And we moved out, and when I found this little church, I went, oh, this is really nice. And so that's why I started coming here. And then Michael picked up, when we got together.
Well, your husband died of cancer.
Mhm.
And a few years later, Teresa and I met each other.
About 5 or 6 years later, we got married. And Father Bob,
Yeah, Father Bob
Was a
the
priest
pastor here.
yeah, and he was really a good guy. And he always wore sandals, and he was always hot. And he was always asking me, are you hot? It's really hot in here. And he always wore sandals, and then he would come to Mass on a motorcycle. And then he got into all kinds of trouble. Later, I don't know if you have ever heard about that, and then Father Hernan came, and he was really gracious. But he only gave Mass on Thursdays and Sundays. And we didn't have Mass any other time. And at that time, we all started, because of him, with communion service. So we had daily communion service here. And Eileen Perchbacher was the real kind of, she was the head of all that. And Rosemary and Midge and Marianne. And then they kept bugging me about lecturing, and I finally succumbed and said I would. And I would finally do communion service, because we would all rotate. And did you do communion service?
Yeah. After a bit, because, I really wasn't too qualified for all this. Father Hernan we weren't a separate parish then, we were combined with Frederick.
We were the satellite parish.
Yeah.
And guardian angels too, right? Wasn't it the three?
I don't know about
I
that.
don't really
Yeah.
remember them being part of the whole
Okay.
thing. Maybe they were.
But Father and I was so busy between the two that, you know, he could only do mass. So that's why we had the communion service. And
We always called ourselves the orphan church.
yeah, that changed drastically when Father Rob came.
But let's talk about before Father Rob came,
Okay.
because it's very unique. We had so many daily mass goers that came to communion service. So we just kept kind of the church running. And Perchbacher was at the head of the helm, and she was quite the grand poupon, so to speak. And she just kind of ran it. She actually did. Father Hernan could have not done this without her. I mean, it was pretty awesome what she did. But so that's when we all started doing setting up for, sacristan duties, but they weren't that much. But if we started setting up for Sunday, and we never had any official training, Father Hernan would just go back and he would train us right there on the spot before, we would go out for mass and stuff, and keep working with us. And a few times I'd forgotten to put the host on the paten and, different things. But he was so laid back. You never felt really bad. He'd go, it's no big deal, But we all kind of initiated in that. And Midge was very much a part of that, which Midge is still here. Marianne doesn't do any of it anymore, but she was extremely a part of it then. And Rosemary and Phyllis and Eileen have all since died. But and then I had a lady just a month ago come up to me crying, and she said, "Do you realize the fruit from being faithful that you guys were in doing the communion services and keeping this little church going? Because look at all the fruit that has happened from the, that meager, little existence that, and we were all very close, extremely close. So if we had parties or anything to do with the church, you knew everybody from church back then. It's kind of different now. So that's kind of what I remember about that. Can you share a favorite memory of attending Mass at St. Scholastica? No, because it kind of evolved for me. Because the more I learned about as a sacristan duty, the more I fell in love with the Mass. And the more I studied about it and learned, and it just brought the Mass to life. And then I know Michael can talk about what his favorite is. So mine was an evolution.
Of just coming to a deeper understanding of the Mass.
Oh yeah, I mean I've
Yeah.
always been, a Catholic. But, there's so many Catholics that go to Mass and they don't know what's going on. And because you don't get involved in the chalice, the purificator, the corporals, the altar cloths, the candles, the candle that is there for the tabernacle. I think as a born Catholic, you just kind of take it for granted.
You don't really know the meaning.
No, and you don't know the meaning, and the meaning really makes your faith grow and get stronger, I think. What about you?
Absolutely. Our Bible leader, Mark Manning, has said that, and I don't recall where he gets the quote from, but that the Catholic faith is shallow enough for a baby to take a bath in and deep enough to drown an elephant. And I think that is absolutely true. The more you want to learn about it, the deeper you can go. And it just never stops. You just keep getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And the deeper you go, the more you really start to appreciate the faith. And so,
What's your favorite?
I think that that is
Memory
absolutely
of
true.
10 minutes.
So in looking through the questions, that I still attend Bible study. I've been attending it for what,
Since you started.
at least 10 years, maybe longer.
And I started
And
Bible study back then too.
and it seems like always I learn more and more about it. And that's what it takes for me to really want to keep coming and to get closer and closer. Is the more I learn, the more I want to learn.
What about
It's-
when you were an altar server?
And
So that's the knowing God part.
yeah, I also served with Father Rob for a number of years, and I served a lot. We were doing mass 3-4 days a week. I would serve with him, and being up on the altar and learning beforehand what's going on from Bible study, and being up on the altar, being so close that you get to see what is happening, is totally different than sitting in the pews and kind of being sort of distracted sometimes by kids crying and things like that. It's a totally different experience up there, and that helped too to deepen my faith. But it was really fun doing that. I have even never did that as a kid either. Never was an altar server. And Father Rob taught me a lot about how to do it, what to do, what he wanted. As a young boy, I went to military school, and we connected because of his military background. So Father Rob and I had a connection that way, and I understood him perfectly. This is what he wanted, and if I wanted to do it, that was going to be the way it was going to be done. And I was fine with that because I didn't have any other preconceived ideas about it. And I can't go on to tell you how much Father Rob has changed this church in the look of it, the altar, what he's been able to do. I honestly believe this, that he would be my candidate for Priest of the Year, at least for Denver. He really would be. I've never seen a priest that gives as much and tries as hard as Father Rob.
And just traveling like we just did also, you really get to see the caliber of priests out there that are a little nonchalant, and they don't have the tabernacle in the main part of the church, and just their nonchalantness. And Father Rob makes the Mass so holy. It's mystical. Every time I come back here, it's just mystical. What happens here is just like unbelievable. And you go away and then you see, how mystical it is. I just wanted to share one thing. As being a lector, you have to study the Gospels and all the readings and think about them so that you've got a good idea of what's going on, and you can't just read off the cuff. You can, but you don't gain from doing that. But just being a sacristan and being a lector and actually doing all the cloths, doing all the purificators and corporals and towels and everything, you actually have Jesus in your house for a whole month when you do it. And we all have 2 months a year that we do it. But and they're all recycled because you're taking them home and letting them soak, and then you're letting them dry, and then you're ironing them, and et cetera, et cetera. And this goes on for a whole month. But so many times you can see the blood in the water from the soaking of all the cloths. And so you really have Jesus in your house for a whole month.
And what do you do with the water?
You dump it on the dirt. You take it outside and you dump it in the dirt, not the grass, the dirt. So I always take it to my garden, which is dirt. So the garden gets a real blessing, in dumping that. But that's what's made my faith grow enormously, and just absolutely love the Mass more and more each, passing year.
So you both have been involved in Mark's Bible study, the Tuesday Bible study. And Teresa, you've also taught.
Yeah, Mark, I haven't been going to his recently because I'm subbing, and I'm like exhausted if I
Just
go
don't
to.
have the energy.
No, I don't have the energy to do
be up
both.
at night.
Yeah, and then, and trying to get ready for the next day and stuff, so I kind of cut out. But yeah, I did confirmation classes for 4 years, 4 or 5 years. When, I can't think of her name, she was the head then. Gloria was the head, yeah. And I like this, it's happening better now because they're being confirmed younger, because the kids were in the 9th grade and the 8th, mostly 9th, and they're starting to lose a lot of their faith right then. And so they kind of blew off a lot of stuff while they were going through. There were some. Karen and Bruce's daughter was one, Elizabeth, she was very involved in it. And I can kind of point out certain kids that really took it serious and stuff. And then there were a lot of other kids that I think it's so much better having it younger now because they're still on fire for the Lord, and they haven't gotten to that teenage year or preteen, where they're starting to, this isn't very cool. So I think that is a really good move that's happened within the church. And it was very fruitful doing that. And I took a lot of classes from Elizabeth was involved in confirmation then, and Elizabeth Ott, and she would have various things where we'd all get together and share the faith and that type of thing, but there was no formal education, kind of like you guys are doing now, like Elizabeth is doing now, But the Bible study started very early on. In fact, one person, they had their daughter and they would always bring her. She was a little 8-month-old. What were their names? They have redheads. She's blonde. She's a lawyer. Huh?
The Friels.
Yeah.
Yes, and they were there for a long time, but then their kids and their family grew too big, and so they quit going.
The Crater's little girl, Maddie.
Maddie was
a little girl when we started attending Bible study. Now she had the baby of her own.
Yeah, she'd always go in the back and do homework and do different things while they were attending and stuff. So the one thing that I think hasn't, I don't want to be negative, but earlier everybody knew everybody. Now, if you go to the 4 o'clock, you get to know the people in the 4 o'clock, or if you go to the 8:30, you know those people, and or the 11:30 or the 5:30. And so we're all we are disconnected. And I know a lot of these people from the other masses, but the new people, I don't know. It's like meeting a brand new person. So I wish that we could do something to
some more
You-
things.
Yeah, unify, you know.
It's hard, the church is really growing, and it's hard to stay connected to everyone. You know, in days past, Teresa and I were greeters, and it was fun to meet the new people and to see the reaction. People would come in and say, I'm tired of the big churches, I love this size, and I love the
And you're
altar
also
looks,
warm.
and it's like, what's your name? And they would tell you, and, I hope to see you again, and, I'm glad you liked it, and it's really a neat church, and we have a wonderful, absolutely wonderful priest, and come on back, and they would, and you felt good about that, as greeters.
Yeah, Deacon Roger and Dina, I didn't know he was a deacon. We were greeting, Michael and I. And, we said, well, welcome to our little church, and we were just talking and stuff. And later he came to me and he said, you guys greeting and everybody in church was so warm that we decided right then and there that was our new church. And I'd heard that from other people too. They said that's why we started going, because you're not an informal church, and it shows. So, and Father Rob has had a big part in making all this happen. So, I mean, I don't know any priest that is as holy as he is on the altar. And I can really say that from just traveling everywhere. It's just kind of amazing that we have that caliber of priest in our parish. He really is a blessing. So.
How has the Catholic culture changed
Oh
over
dear.
time?
So
So
it's
you
got,
mentioned the one thing, the restored order for confirmation.
yes,
That's a good change.
that is a good thing. That's an excellent thing. And the other good thing is that we have summer Bible study here, and my kids never got to go to Catholic Bible study. I always had to send them to Protestant Bible study, and I had to go to Protestant Bible study when my kids were younger and stuff, because there was no Catholic Bible study.
In the
So,
summer.
so there's been really some real wonderful things, and but the church as a big whole, it's going through horrible labor pains right now, and there's been a huge loss of attendance. And I can't pinpoint that this church has lost a lot of people. I don't think this church has.
Erie's growing too fast,
Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But
but we see it. When
the
we-
culture, it's gotten far worse, than it once was. Although the Latin Mass has brought a lot of young people back into the church. They love the Latin, they love the holiness, they
The
just
tradition.
tradition. They love that because there is no tradition now. It's like loosey-goosey out there. Anything and everything goes. So it has brought a lot of young people, but overall the Catholic Church has massively lost attendance, which is real unfortunate. So,
What advice would you have for young people to keep their faith?
you have to practice what you learn, and you have to learn the faith. I'm a cradle Catholic, so is Teresa. We were confirmed and went through all of that when we were children, and I got away from it. I didn't pay a whole lot of attention. That was a requirement for going to school. And after that, I sort of got, I would go to church, but it didn't really mean a whole lot. Not it's when you start to really put forth the effort to learn about where the faith is coming from, and that makes you really, really start to appreciate, if you understand the background, if you understand the beginnings, if you understand what Jesus was trying to teach, then you see it today in the church trying to do the same thing. I think that's what I would tell young people. Don't just take it for granted. Learn it.
Their parents have to be going too, and they have to be strong, or the kids won't be. And the parents can be very strong and very wonderful Catholics. And the kids during the teen, and I call the 20s the new teens, because that seems to be when so many young people leave the church. You know, and I mean, everything goes now. Living together, you know, it's totally accepted. Abortion, there's just so many things that we didn't have to deal with, you know, when we were younger, and now it's just the norm. And you're kind of a weirdo if you're not part of the norm. And so that's what's really hurt, you know, I think the church a lot.
There's a lot of pressure. So what can you do what have you done? Because you went through the 60s and 70s.
Well, I went through the 60s, and I never left the church, you know, and I loved Blessed Mother. Growing up, I wrote a poem, and I actually got first place, and Monsignor gave me a thing back in the 3rd grade over the poem. I don't know why I went back to that. That's kind of
I
interesting.
never heard about this poem.
Yeah. But in any event,
So maybe the rosary is a weapon?
well, my parents always had us saying the rosary. I didn't like it. But, you know, and we'd be like horses running to the barn on the last, you know, the decade. You know, we were getting near home, you know, where you were quitting to say the rosary. My parents were very staunch Catholic, and I had to do everything. So I did a little bit of rebellion when I was raising my kids, and we lived in Boulder, and so the kids didn't have confirmation on time, and they didn't have communion on time, and confession, and all of that. But due to Merlin Carruthers, I started reading his books, and I had a massive conversion. And he was Protestant, he was charismatic, and I had a massive, massive conversion.
So it's that knowing your faith piece.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
just fell in love with the Lord. And then my whole family, my dad was in the Corsillo down in near Santa Fe, and he was very involved in the charismatic movement, and we would go down to Albuquerque to the charismatic movement retreats that were down there. And they were kind of awesome, and that revived me and the whole Catholic Church. And I know as a registered dietitian nutritionist, talking to different bishop ones and priests when they would come in with heart attacks and stuff, and I'd go, why did you quit the charismatic movement? Because that was just bringing people in like crazy in the 60s. It really was 70s too. And he said because we couldn't control the people, and they were kind of going out there and here and here and here. So, you know, and it's really kind of unfortunate, because that you need the fire, and the kids need the fire. They need the fire to keep their faith. They have to
Literally. Like bonfires.
literally, you have to have the fire of the Holy Spirit. And I can't say that I've stayed in that fire all these years because of that, but but then just doing things and doing more for the church helps you with your faith. It actually does. If you're a bystander and you just come to Mass and you don't want to meet anybody and you want to be kind of your lone person and this type of thing, your faith probably won't grow. It just doesn't seem to. Because I know when I took my kids in Boulder, I took them to Mass every Sunday. And the priests weren't particularly nice, because Ed and Pat were being ornery in church, for one thing. And I don't know. Just seeing Father Rob compared to the priests then, because there were so many priests leaving the Catholic Church, especially in Boulder.
In the 70s.
Oh my goodness,
Yeah.
they were going out the door as fast as they were coming in. And I don't think they were getting the proper training either. That's why they were leaving and stuff.
It's a really good point, though, about being involved in your parish, doing and giving back, because we don't have enough people doing it. And both Teresa and I have learned that when you give, you get back. It just flows. I don't know why, it just does, you know. And we've been pretty involved in this little parish, and it's partly because of our involvement is why we think so highly of the parish. There's not another church like this around at all, you know.
There might be, we just don't know
Well, I
about
mean,
it.
if you go to the big churches in Longmont and Boulder, Lafayette, and things like that, it's a completely different type of culture than it is here. And you know, we're growing, and we might eventually get like that, but right now we're not. And it's this is kind of unique, having Erie grow the way it is, and having this little church here. It's pretty special.
It will change when we go out to Benedict and have a bigger church. It will change again, you know, and we might not be blessed with Father Rob being there too. But I can't think about that. Just, you know, you think about, you know, right now. The one thing that if you're bored in the Mass and it's just absolutely boring to you, get as close as you can to the altar. That's really important, because when you're clear in the back, you miss a lot. You absolutely miss a lot. That's what's going on, you know. And when you're, you know, when I get to lecture or not lecturing, you know, but you're up there lecturing, you're right there with the priest. It's kind of like a wonderful thing, because you get to be like an altar server, but not on the altar proper. And the gifts from the Holy Spirit that you get by being close to the altar. So I hope our new church will have that, where everybody will be much closer and not kind of clear back there.
I hope people find it useful.